The top business stories live from the Sky newsroom. Another blow for Boeing as thousands of staff go on strike over pay. Will be live in Washington state. Vodafone dismisses warnings from the competition watchdog over its planned £15 billion merger with Three.
On the back of this transaction, what we will have is a scaled player in the market, a scaled player that's not only able to compete on price, but will be competing on quality.
Good afternoon. This is Business Live. The beleaguered plane manufacturer Boeing has suffered another setback as its workforce voted to go on strike.
Our members voted across Puget Sound, Portland, Moses Lake, Victorville, Edwards Air Force Base, and other remote locations. This is about respect. This is about addressing the past, and this is about fighting for our future. Our members rejected the contract by 94.6%.
Now, Boeing says it's ready to negotiate with those unions after 30,000 factory workers voted to walk out. The International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers rejected a pay increase of 25% over 4 years. It's the latest blow in a disastrous year for the aerospace giant, which has been hit by manufacturing and safety concerns. Let's go live to Washington state now and speak to CNBC's auto and airline industry reporter, Phil Beau. Phil, good to see you. Enormous vote in favour of this walkout. Are the unions here trying to get maximum leverage with a new chief executive of Boeing who's only just got his feet under the table?
Absolutely, they are looking for maximum leverage. And you mentioned the offer that they rejected, 25% raise over the next 4 years. Ordinarily, if you said to somebody, we're going to give you a 25% raise over 4 years, generally speaking, people would say, okay, I'll take that. But this contract was rejected by 94% of the machinists who voted. Why? Because they believe they have not had a legitimate raise, a meaningful raise, I should say, in the previous 16 years. They got 4% over the course of 8 years with the previous contract from 2016 all the way up to 2024. So from their perspective, there's a lot further that Boeing has to go in order to meet their demands and make them feel as though they are properly compensated. And yes, with a new CEO who knows that this company has a host of problems that need to be resolved, they are looking for maximum leverage, Paul.
Now, here in the UK, we think of Boeing as an American industrial giant. We've seen the troubles of the last year, the safety concerns in manufacturing. Just how damaged is the brand in the US?
It's damaged not only here in the U.S., but also around the world. Look, it's not uncommon, and I do a lot of travel for my job. It is not uncommon for me, as I am in an airport or getting on a plane, for somebody to make a comment about Boeing. Either, are we sure that the planes are safe, or you're flying on a Boeing plane? Is that a smart thing to do? Now, look, nobody is questioning the safety of the Boeing aircraft around the world that are in service right now. They are safe. They are backed by the regulators, whether it's the FAA, EASA in Europe, whoever it is. Nobody is questioning the safety of those aircraft. But given what we saw earlier this year with the Alaska Airlines door plug blowout, the 737 MAX crashes, the questions about safety and reliability in the manufacturing process, yes, this is a very damaged brand right now, and it's particularly bad here in the United States, but it's also worldwide. And that's the main job for the new CEO. Once he can get this strike resolved, he's got to fix Boeing's brand, and by extension, Boeing's perception around the world that it is a leader when it comes to building safe aircraft.
Phil Beau, thank you very much. They're live on the picket line in Washington state. Now, Vodafone has told Sky News the competition regulator is completely wrong to say its proposed £15 billion merger with Three will leave tens of millions of mobile phone users paying more for their services. The Competition and Markets Authority has said the deal, which will create the UK's biggest mobile network, poses a substantial risk of reducing competition.
And we're concerned that the merger will push up customer bills and lead to increases in prices across the market because of the reduction in competition. It doesn't stop there, however, because both companies have argued quite strongly that they would make significant investments in their new network with new 5G technologies, and that those will lead to quite significant improvements in mobile services across the UK. And we agree to some extent. However, we're not convinced that they would necessarily follow through fully on the investments that they say they will make.
But earlier on Business Live, Ahmed Assam, Vodafone's chief executive of European markets, dismissed the CMA's claims.
We completely disagree with the CMA conclusion when it comes to pricing. And that's because for many of our customers today, when they go out on the street, there are more than four operators operating in the market. There are a number of brands that are selling mobile in the market, and that is the level of competition we see in the UK. On the back of this transaction, what we will have is a scaled player in the market, a scaled player that's not only able to compete on price, but will be competing on quality.
By Kester Mann, Analyst and Director of Consumer and Connectivity at CCS Insight. Kester, thanks for making time for us. I know Vodafone's shares were slightly positive when this news came out. That suggests the markets think somehow this deal will get through. What's your take?
Yeah, my take is that the deal will be approved. I think it's the right deal for the UK. And I think it's very interesting to hear the findings from the Competition and Markets Authority this morning, in that obviously we were always going to get remedies required to get the deal over the line, but it doesn't appear that those remedies may be as onerous or as challenging as was first thought. And I think that's a very positive sign for Vodafone and Three looking to get this merger over the line.
You say you think it's probably the right thing. Do UK consumers get a decent deal for their mobile phone? Both Three and Vodafone saying today there are two big players and two smaller players, and arguing a reduction in the number of players will boost competition. What sort of a deal do we get?
Well, there's no doubt the pricing is very attractive in the UK. We benefit from amongst the lowest prices in Europe. So in that respect, UK consumers do get a very good deal. But there are also some challenges around the deployment of networks, and this is at the heart of the merger. And the argument put forward by Vodafone and Three is that by combining, they'll have greater scale and therefore will be able to make more efficient investments into the UK mobile network infrastructure that ultimately will be the benefit of everybody. And that's the side of the debate that I'm on the side of.
Yeah, they put it very clearly that they will spend, I think, £11 billion in improving the network without prices going up. Clearly, the CMA is less certain about that second part of that. Can't we? Is it not possible to have both a decent network and a truly competitive market for consumers and those of us who are paying the bills?
I think there's a balance to be had. If we look at the markets, for example, like the US, where mobile coverage is very strong and is very widespread, but also US customers pay an awful lot of money for their mobile services. So I think there's a right balance to be struck. And I think that clearly Vodafone and Three, in collaboration with the Competition and Markets Authority, will look to identify that position where we can have great infrastructure and also affordable prices.
Yeah, and in terms of how this deal could happen, the CMA laid out various remedies, as they call them, ways of making this deal more competitive and less harmful, as they would characterise it. They offer a few options: divesting, so companies could sell some of their other holdings, or they could offer guarantees. Given the markets think this will happen, and the companies probably do too, what is the likeliest route they will take, do you think, to get this across the line and land the £15 billion deal so many with an interest in it want to see happen?
Yeah, well, this was the crucial part of the ruling this morning. It appears that the CMA's position is open to so-called behavioural remedies. So, for example, this might mean better terms for virtual providers like Sky Mobile, more support for disadvantaged customers, obviously relevant in these challenging economic times, or maybe lower prices than perhaps would have been put forward. But these are far more attractive to Vodafone and Three than the more onerous structural remedies that would include selling major assets or even supporting a new entrant. And that would really put off Vodafone and Three going forward with the move. It would undermine a lot of the objectives. So the apparent preference for behavioural remedies appears to be a positive sign for Vodafone and Three trying to get this deal approved.
If the CMA does let this happen, it will have it will have pushed it all the way. It's gone through into the third phase of this inquiry now. One does hear the argument that actually this is the competition regulator getting in the way of a deal that the city wants, that the country needs. It's overstepping its mark and perhaps acting against the wider business interest. What do you make of that?
I think it's right that there's a significant and comprehensive investigation into this deal. It impacts many millions of customers in the UK, as we know. There are always going to be concerns over prices when companies come together and merge. So I think that, yes, it has taken a long time to come together. We are perhaps now reaching the final straight of the investigation, but a comprehensive investigation was the right thing to do. The CMA have gone about it in a professional way. They've scrutinised many aspects of the deal and will continue to do so. But I think for the good of the industry, the right decision will be to approve it.
Kester, Mann, thanks for that. We will stay across it as it progresses.
Pleasure.
A lawyer representing more than 40 former sub-postmasters says he believes an investigation into a potential second post office scandal will have a positive outcome. The Department for Business and Trade is looking at a report into Capture, the predecessor to the faulty Horizon accounting software, which led to the false conviction of hundreds of sub-postmasters. I'm joined by our business correspondent, Adele Robinson, who has this story. Adele, we're all familiar with Fujitsu's Horizon software. Remind us about where Capture fits in to the story that we've been following so closely at the public inquiry and, of course, on TV.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Yes, Capture was a system that was used in post office branches, some post office branches in the 90s. Some described it as essentially a glorified spreadsheet, but basically it was an accounting system that was used before Horizon, as you say. It was standalone. It wasn't part of a wider, more complex system like Horizon was. And it was actually uploaded via floppy disk to PCs. Because it was before the widespread computerisation of post office branches in 1999, it was only rolled out to some branches, not all post office branches across the UK. I remember that Horizon convictions, those wrongful convictions, were between 1999 and 2015. But some of the claims that have been made by former sub-postmasters have some striking similarities with the Horizon scandal, namely that former sub-postmasters claim that they were subject to erroneous shortfalls in their accounts, that they were accused of stealing, and that they were forced to make good those amounts, that they lost their businesses, and some of them went bankrupt. And it was at the beginning of this summer that, along with MPs and lawyers for the former sub-postmasters, that it was agreed that the government would appoint an independent IT specialist investigators, and that was Kroll. And they've been conducting their investigations ever since, and that has now completed.
And if it is positive, briefly, if it found that the sub-postmasters' claims, potential wrongdoing here are upheld, what happens next?
Well, yes, we know the report has completed. We know it's been passed on to the Department for Business and Trade, and they'll be dissecting it now. And they are expected to release it both to the claimants, and also to the Post Office at the same time at some point in the next couple of weeks. Now, we've spoken to Neil Hudgell from Hudgell Solicitors, who represents around 40 of former sub-postmasters who claim they became victims of the Capture system. Now, he says that he believes that it will be a positive investigation, a positive report, potentially in favour of the sub-postmasters. He hasn't seen it. Nobody's seen that report yet, but he believes that it will be. And if it is positive, then it could pave the way towards conversations, or a process at least, around potential exonerations over convictions potentially being unsafe, whether or not that will involve legislation or the Court of Appeal. But I think the thing to remember is that, like many Horizon victims, if these are indeed Capture victims, they will be most likely older than Horizon victims. They potentially were caught up in this system that went wrong up to 30 years ago. So again, time is of the essence. And Neil Hudgell's saying that if that is the case, then there will need to be a timely process put in place, that it will need to be considered as to what happens. And as quickly as possible what will happen for these people who've been waiting a long time. But of course, we don't know for certain the conclusions of the report. But as I said, we expect to hear those conclusions in the next couple of weeks.
And speed has not been the essence of the Post Office process. Adele Robinson, thank you very much. Some other stories now. Two of Britain's biggest newspaper publishers are taking the axe to their US workforces, slashing scores of jobs. It's the latest evidence of mounting financial pressures across the media sector. Sky News has learnt that News UK, the publisher of The Sun, and DMGT, owner of the Daily Mail, have announced sweeping internal restructurings in their digital operations in the United States. Planning permission for what would have been the UK's first new deep coal mine in 30 years has been declared unlawful at the High Court. The development at Whitehaven in Cumbria was given the green light by the previous government, but today a judge found the decision to be legally flawed following a challenge by environmental campaigners. PwC's China division has been fined £47 million and banned for 6 months by the Chinese authorities over its audit of the failed property giant Evergrande. The accounting firm has been accused by Beijing of concealing fraud during the audit. And Britain recorded almost £3.5 billion worth of office transactions in the first 6 months of 2024, accounting for almost a third of total European office deals, according to data from real estate firm Savills. The spike comes after a prolonged post-pandemic downturn in the office sector. Still to come on Business Live, we'll take a look at how the markets are ending the week.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling. War, unrest, revolutions.
It's not his country, it's ours, and we're going to take it back.
They have succeeded for the first time in their country's history in removing a leader from power. Now, freedom! There was fighting here, but there's clearly now a lull, and they're using it to bring up more ammunition. We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world. This is a mass exodus in which Russia is hemorrhaging some of its brightest and its best. According to the local weather channel, there have been more than 2,500 lightning strikes, torrential rain and flash flooding, all on top of this week's lethal tornado. What stays with you most in this job is some of the people you meet. What is your worst fear about what the Russians want to do to the children?
They're just boosting demographics by stealing young people.
Would you like to take the opportunity, Mr. President, on Sky News to invite Barack Obama to come here? Mr. Trump, are you running for president? Can you confirm it?
We're going to take a look, a very serious look.
On that day, we saw your fighters killing women, killing children. Was that a mistake? Did you go too far? You couldn't control your fighters? The full force of the state is being used to crush any protest. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued with its ultimatum to the people of Ashkelon, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in. Another alarm. The mood here is jittery and nervous. We're seeing the world get more and more divided, and it's our job to try to make sense of it all.
What's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America? People want their country to work.
You want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
You want to talk business? Meet me in the On Board Lounge. Fly Emirates, fly better.
Let's have a look at the markets and see how things have finished in Europe. There we go, with blue territory across the board. The DAX up almost 1%, and in positive territory, the IBEX too, beyond 1%. That's the end of the week in Europe. On Wall Street, where they're still trading, the Nasdaq 100 also opened up just under 0.5%. Here, the FTSE closed up nearly 0.4%. There it is. And the Vodafone share price ended in positive territory, despite that warning from the CMA we were discussing earlier over its proposed merger with Three. Burberry and Rentokil also among the gainers following recent sell-offs. You can see them there, both up above 1% of gains. AstraZeneca was a big faller, though, again, down more than 1%, following some negative broker comment and some less than encouraging drug trial results earlier in the week. To the currencies and the pound, let's have a little look. The pound in positive territory against the dollar and the euro also up a smidgen against the dollar. A barrel of Brent crude finally is up again. It's recovered from that midweek blip, $72.53. Joining me now is the equity market analyst, Anna Macdonald. Anna, hi, thanks very much for joining us this afternoon. Let's start with Vodafone and Three. We've been talking about it all day. A pretty punchy ruling from the CMA. They got an equally tough response from Vodafone when we spoke to them. What are the shares done? What do you think the market expects to happen?
Well, the shares, as you can see, have been up a little. The shares haven't done well, really, since the merger is announced. But I don't think that that's really because so much about the merger, but it's just been the environment for Vodafone. Remember that they're pretty indebted and interest rates have been on an upward trajectory. It's also important to realise that UK revenues are actually just shy of a fifth of the overall total. Germany is actually a much more important market. So whilst I would actually say this is moderately good news for Vodafone in terms of the deal, I think will go ahead, it's probably not as important as just driving the overall business and the balance sheet.
That point about Germany is fascinating. Does that mean this is a big deal here that we're all looking at? Actually, Vodafone HQ, it's one piece on the chessboard. It's not the be-all and end-all.
Yeah, absolutely. Whilst it's, when we think about what the CMA have decided today, they're allowing the third and fourth place in terms of size operators to combine in the UK, probably if the remedies that Vodafone and Three suggest are satisfy them. And that will then become the number one player. Germany's a bigger market for them, and also they've got interests in other European markets and in the rest of the world, including Africa. So yes, there's lots more important things that they need to be doing.
AstraZeneca has finished the week off. It's been down. We've had some negative comment from brokers. We also had some drug trials which seem to have left the markets unimpressed. Talk us through what's going on. It's a hugely important company in the UK markets and across Europe.
Yes, it's our largest company. I was actually thinking back to when Vodafone used to be our largest company, but it's around a 20 billion market cap now. AstraZeneca hit the heady heights of 200 billion last month, but now it's just under 100, and it's about 185. Now, it's fallen because there are expectations, well, they put it out there that they want to almost double their revenues by 2030. That's generating as much as 80 billion by 2030. And one of the high hopes is in their oncology part of the business. And one of these treatments was this lung cancer treatment, which unfortunately had kind of mixed results published on Tuesday. And that's led Deutsche and another couple of brokers to start thinking about have we really put in our expectations too much revenue growth for the future? And do we need to cut back on our numbers? And that's led to the shares being off, I think, around 6-7% for the week, which, if you're talking about an index heavyweight, I think this is around 9% in terms of the weighting of the FTSE. That's a big deal.
Yeah, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you, Anna. That's fascinating stuff. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
And don't forget to check out Sky News' award-winning Money blog for all the latest personal and financial news. You can see the QR code there. That is it from me. Coming up next is Jonathan Samuels with the News Hour. He'll be looking at Sir Keir Starmer and Foreign Secretary David Lammy in Washington to meet Joe Biden, discussing Russia.